Right. Let's switch to another area. You know, I know that you actually had a panel in which you actually had recently where you talked about the issue of peace in the region. You know, what came out of that? Anything positive?
Well, that was a very interesting panel. That was a panel where Princeton and the economists put together a panel on Darfur and the crisis there. We had Senator Frist, the former majority leader, Mia Farrow, and the journalist from The Economist magazine, and myself talking about the crisis. And what came out of that discussion is that there are a number of things impacting and the intransigence of the government of Sudan to really reach an accommodation. We already have one peace agreement between the North and the South affecting another region, and make sure that that's really implemented, but it also has implications for the Darfur region and how that is carried out. But we still got to put more pressure on the Sudanese government to be more forthcoming and to stop all the killing and stuff that's going on there, and it's quite severe. I mean, Mia Farrow, I think, more than anything else, had been there about 8 or 9 times and had lots of pictures showing the horrors of villages being burned, women being raped, and their interviews with these women. And so it's just a very tragic situation. I think one of the things that came out of that is that there's no short-term solution to the crisis, that we have to look for short-term ways of trying to bring the parties together to try to resolve the issue, but we have to look at it also as a long-range problem and look at it from a 3 to 5 year period in terms of trying to resolve it. But one thing is for sure, we got to put more pressure on the Sudanese government, and also the government of China came up. The Chinese are very interested in the resources that are available in Sudan, such as oil and those kinds of things, and they have been very sympathetic toward the Sudanese. And I think we have to put pressure on them to put pressure on the Sudanese to come to the negotiating table.
Yeah, Don, you had passed a resolution in the House. What did that resolution entail?
It was actually the first time that the House of Representatives in its history ever passed a resolution declaring genocide was going on. So it was really quite a historical step. We did anticipate that there would be more action on the part of our government. But you see, the U.S. government sort of kind of have, in my opinion, a wink and a nod to the government of Sudan. They're so involved in the so-called war on terror, and they think that Sudan, al-Bashir and his people are going to give them information about al-Qaeda. As you know, Osama bin Laden lived in Sudan for 5 years, during the bombings of our mission in Kenya and Tanzania. He was living right in Sudan. And so our government is trying to have a relationship with Sudan because they think that the war on terror is the #1 issue. The government of Sudan is an illegitimate government. Mia Farrow came in March. She was in my district, as a matter of fact, and talked about Darfur. I've had her on my panels here in Washington. Just 3 or 4 days ago, the government of Sudan bombed a village and killed people. Still going on. They have a group called the Janjaweed, who are Arab horsemen and nomads that are herders. And one of the problems with Darfur is the Darfurians are black African Muslims that came up from the center part of Africa, hundreds of years ago. And the Janjaweed are the northern, more Arabic, but they're all Muslims. And we were surprised, as Brother Coles said, that the North-South agreement was between the non-Arabs and the Arabs, Dr. John Garang. And that war ended. And all of a sudden, the people in Darfur, who were Muslim, just like the central government, were being attacked by their own government. So, as you mentioned, pressure on China must happen. I went to China and just told the second-in-command of the Communist Party right in the Great Hall that, they say we don't intervene with countries, we just do business, we don't get involved internally. So you got to get involved internally. You can't be dealing with people who are killing their own people and figure that you can just say, well, we don't get involved, and so we've got to keep the pressure on China so that they do the right. They always claim they will block in the Security Council. They're one of the 5 permanent members. So any resolution that comes up, if they say no, it goes nowhere. Right. It doesn't even go out of that body. It doesn't even get to the main. So we've got to keep pressure on China, and I think we can do a better job than what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, let's switch more to one other area. A lot of people are talking about in terms of how women are sort of dealt with or treated in Africa. fact that they're just so important to the economy, but when it comes to education, all the kind of things that sort of make the economy work in terms of having the ability and the skills and all that, they do not have it, and there's no emphasis being placed on it. What can we do to sort of get them to focus on the fact that, women are very, very important in the overall scheme of things?
Well, I think there have been a number of sort of gender plans put together in terms of gender equality. One has been put together by the ILO, the International Labor Organization, another by the World Bank. And the British government has also come forward and put together a gender equality plan. And they're calling on the world to do the same. When we look at Africa in terms of women, women in Africa are the poorest women in the world. And their plight in terms of their legislative rights and those kinds of things are generally far behind many other countries in the world in terms of how women are regarded and how they're treated. Yet African women provide most of the labor, and they are the agriculturalists that do a lot of the work, and they're income earners and they're breadwinners for their families. So we believe that much more needs to be done to bring about gender equality. And recently, DFID, the Department of Development Assistance from England, held a conference here in Washington at National Geographic. I think Congressman Payne was there and participated in that conference. And they called for more investments in education for women. They also called for more microcredit programs which can benefit women. And they also called for pushing for more legislation to bring about gender equity. And we've launched recently at a reception on International Women's Day on March 8th a summary, executive summary of that report. And it's going to be a very important report, and we hope that it's being considered by leaders around the world because it's a very important issue.
Very quickly, what more can the United States do?
Well, I think that what we need to do is talk about more trade and not necessarily aid. I think we've got to encourage the African nations to deal with democracy. It was working. I mean, the winds of democracy after the Cold War ended were really tremendous. We have to get back to governance, democracy. We have to keep encouraging, as Julius just said, gender equity. We just had a hearing yesterday about higher education in Africa. We've been talking about now girls that are finally being allowed to go to elementary schools, the girl child as they refer to it, because they were excluded, just because of resources. But we got to talk about higher ed because if you don't have teachers, they've doubled the number of students in their elementary and secondary schools. Well, if you don't have teachers qualified, then it's not going to work. So this whole question, I think the U.S. can do more to encourage democracy, good governance, and the things that have already been mentioned that we need to do more of.
Well, let me thank both of you for the work that you've been doing, of course, in the region. I want to thank you for what you're doing, and of course a Morehouse man being involved in Africa, I like that. I want you to know that. And of course you got a Seton Hall guy here who's been involved in it for many, many years. Let me thank you so much for being on News and Views, and thank you so much for what you're doing on behalf of the people.
Let me congratulate you for all the good work you're doing for your people in your district.
Thank you. Appreciate your kind work.
You've been very effective and very helpful to the continent. We appreciate it a great deal.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being on News and Views.
Thank you.
You have been watching Political News and Views with Congressman Ed Towns of the 10th Congressional District of New York. If you have any questions or comments regarding this program, please write care of Congressman Ed Towns, U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C. 20515, or call 202-225-5936.